You sat through 12 years of school. You memorized the water cycle. You learned the dates of wars you'll never fight. But nobody ever sat you down and explained the actual biological forces steering half the human race. That silence was not an accident. It was a gap. And the real story underneath it is far stranger than anything in your textbook. You dissected a frog. You labeled a cell. But could you explain why women live decades past menopause when almost no other mammal does? Probably not. And that gap in your knowledge was not because the science didn't exist, it just never made it past the classroom door. Here's what you were never told. For most of human history, the female body was not a passive vessel waiting for events to happen to it. It was running one of the most sophisticated strategic systems evolution ever produced. Quiet, constant, almost invisible. And it is still running inside every woman alive today, whether she knows it or not. Think about that for a second. What else is happening in your biology right now that nobody explained to you? Start with the myth you were handed first, that female mammals are simply choosy and males are simply eager. End of story. Real research paints something far more layered. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy spent decades studying primates and found that females across many species are not passive at all. They actively pursue multiple partners. They manipulate paternity certainty. They use sex as a tool for protection, alliance building, and resource access, not just reproduction. Hrdy called this the myth of the passive female, and her work quietly rewrote how scientists understood an entire half of nature. Your school never mentioned her name, but her research changed the field. Hrdy studied Langur monkeys in India and noticed females mating with multiple males even when one dominant male was already available. Under the old model, that behavior made no sense. Females were supposed to simply wait for the best male, but the Langurs weren't following the script. Hrdy realized the multiple mating served a purpose. Confusing paternity gave more males a biological reason not to harm the offspring, since any one of them might be the father. Ambiguity became protection. Now push further back to the deep logic behind female mate choice itself. Evolutionary biologist Robert Trivers proposed something called parental investment theory back in 1972. His idea was simple but radical. Whichever sex invests more in offspring becomes more selective about who they mate with. For humans, pregnancy, birth, and nursing place enormous biological cost on women specifically. 9 months, years of nursing. A body reshaped by hormones you never chose. That cost is not symbolic, it is load-bearing. And it explains at a mechanical level why female choosiness shows up again and again across cultures, across centuries, across continents. You were taught the water cycle repeats. Nobody taught you this repeats too. The pattern isn't unique to humans either. Seahorses flip it entirely since males carry the young, and in those species it's the males who become choosier. That detail matters. It proves the logic isn't really about male or female as fixed labels. It's about cost. Whoever pays more chooses more carefully. Here's where it gets stranger. Female preferences are not fixed. They shift. Psychologist David Buss ran cross-cultural studies across dozens of countries and found consistent patterns in what women prioritize when selecting partners, patterns tied to resources, stability, and protection, patterns that show up whether you're looking at hunter-gatherer societies or modern dating apps. But other researchers went further and found something even more unsettling. Some studies suggest subtle shifts in preference across the menstrual cycle itself, tracking shifts in hormone levels tied to fertility windows. The research here remains debated, and some of it hasn't replicated cleanly, but the mere possibility should stop you. Your preferences might not always be fully yours. They might be on a schedule older than language. Doesn't that feel like something a biology class should have covered? It's also worth being honest about the science here. Some of the cycle shift research ran into serious replication problems, with several original effects shrinking or vanishing when other labs tried to repeat them under stricter conditions. That doesn't erase the idea. It just means the true answer, the one your teachers never had time to give you, is, we're still figuring this out. Now consider a piece of the puzzle almost nobody outside academia has heard of, the grandmother hypothesis. Anthropologist Kristen Hawkes studied the Hadza, a hunter-gatherer population in Tanzania, And notice something odd. Human females live for decades after menopause. Almost no other mammal does this. Most animals stay fertile until death. So why would evolution keep women alive and healthy long after reproduction ends? Hawks found her answer in the data itself. Grandmothers who helped gather food and care for grandchildren dramatically increased those grandchildren's survival odds. Menopause wasn't a biological glitch, it was a strategy. Older women became a resource so valuable that evolution rewired the human lifespan around them. Your great-great-grandmother's decades of life after childbirth weren't wasted years. They were an engine quietly driving the survival of your entire bloodline. And that engine is still running in every grandmother alive today, whether anyone ever thanks her for it or not. That single fact reframes what female nature even means. It's not just about attraction and reproduction, it's about decades of strategic, cooperative labor that shaped whether children lived or died. So, why weren't you taught any of this? Part of the answer is timing. Much of this research is recent, decades old at most, still being debated, refined, sometimes overturned. Textbooks move slowly, curriculum boards move slower. But part of the answer is discomfort. Talking honestly about evolved differences between sexes makes people nervous, and nervous institutions tend to simplify or skip the subject entirely rather than risk the conversation. So generations of students walked out of biology class knowing more about photosynthesis than about the forces literally shaping who they'd fall in love with. Consider how strange that trade-off really is. An entire curriculum built to prepare you for adulthood, and yet the one system that shapes nearly every relationship you'll ever have was left out entirely, as if it were too sensitive to survive a lesson plan. There's another layer too, one researchers call female intrasexual competition. Psychologist Anne Campbell studied how women compete with each other, not through direct physical confrontation the way male competition often plays out, but through subtler tools, reputation, social alliances, indirect aggression, mate guarding. Campbell's work suggested this style of competition carries its own evolutionary logic, tied to the higher physical risk pregnancy already imposes on women. Direct violence threatens a body that's carrying the next generation, so the competition moved underground into words, glances, and social maneuvering instead. Have you ever felt tension in a room and couldn't quite name why? That might be why. Researchers call this the staying alive hypothesis. A man who loses a fight might lose status. A woman who loses one historically risked losing far more, including a pregnancy, or her ability to care for existing children, so the competition didn't disappear, it just changed shape. None of this means biology is destiny. Culture, individual choice, and circumstance shape behavior constantly, and plenty of researchers push back hard against overly simple evolutionary stories, warning that it's easy to cherry-pick data to fit a narrative that sounds tidy but isn't. The honest picture is messier than any single theory. Hardy's work complicates trivers. New replication studies complicate bus. Hawks reframes the whole conversation around aging. Science here is a live argument, not a settled verdict. But that argument is worth knowing exists, because right now, without ever being told any of this, you are walking around inside a body running ancient software, following instincts you never chose and were never taught to recognize. Not a flaw to fix. Not a mystery to solve in one video. Just a fact, quietly waiting for you to notice it. You sat through 12 years of school memorizing facts about the world outside you. Nobody ever taught you the facts running quietly inside you the entire time.